Welcome to On The Spot with Aureus FX. Today, I get the opportunity to sit down with three very experienced business leaders. They're here to share their journey within the FX and payments world. Our first guest is Mark Smith-Halvorsen. Mark is currently the Managing Director of Aureus FX. Having previously built an industry-leading business within this space, today Mark talks about what it's like to start again. So please, welcome Mark to the show. So, your CV tells me that you've very much done this before. Why are you back?
I started in the industry in 1999, a long time ago now, and worked in the industry from that point onwards for about 20 years. And it's seen me take a break from it for about 5 years. But having started some conversations with some people that are now working in this space and looking at listening to the fact that the business that we do, clients we serve, really global, seemed like a really nice balance between having had enough time away from the coalface and away from being really integral to a business in this space, and also having my interest piqued really, and finding some familiar things, hearing some familiar sounds. And I suppose it's really fair to say I've just been dragged back into something that I really enjoy.
Yeah. So what was it about this specific opportunity that made it right?
So I spoke to some young entrepreneurs, some people that had started their own businesses, and did a little bit of non-exec director work, and just gave some consultancy stroke advice support to some people that are in the corporate FX space. And then met a young man that had worked in this industry for over 10 years and was asking proper questions, serious questions about how you would do this, and what the first steps are, what the costs are, what the consequences are. And that project alone really kind of, as I say, made me want to step back into forming something that, everybody involved hopes will be of great value.
Yeah. I know the original plan obviously was to be regulated. As far as I'm aware, you're not. What happened with that?
Very good question. That certainly was that was a goal and the prime focus. And the small team that we put together to work on an FCA application to enter the market as a regulated business, we worked together for 12 months or more actually on an application. But it also coincided with a time when the regulator, the FCA, seemed to be changing the goalposts and raising the barriers to entry, and the cost and time involved with presenting that application with leaving you with a fair degree of optimism seemed to be moving. And so in a lot of ways we decided to take a little bit of time out, take stock of the actual current situation, listen to what the regulator was saying, and try and understand in terms of giving yourself the best chance of getting a successful outcome where the new benchmarks were.
So am I right in saying that Aureus is about 7 or 8 months old?
Yeah, hard to believe that. Certainly we've got a whole bunch of clients that we act for already, but very quickly, I mean, the first part of becoming operational was finding a home for Aureus FX, if you like, a HQ. So certainly my partner and I used some shoe leather to get around and look at somewhere that was quite central. It was quite important that we found somewhere central from a recruitment point of view, so that we could attract talent from the widest spread of locations. But it was also important that we found somewhere that was modern and flexible and welcoming. And I think we've done that. We've got our site is on the north end of the city, quite close to Shoreditch, and the feedback from the people that work from us and the clients and partners that we use commercially is really positive.
Good. Businesses in this industry, whether they be regulated or white label, rely quite heavily on banks and brokers to offer their facilities. How does that look at the moment?
Well, like a regulated business, yes, we had to find somebody that would act for us in terms of providing currencies, liquidity, and in this instance, risk assessment, compliance, technology, payment processing technology and platforms. And yeah, we've done that. And that's the bedrock to us delivering a client proposition that helps them to solve cross-border payments and FX hedging challenges.
As we both know, there are a couple of different routes to market in this. What did you consider when choosing the best route for Aureus?
I think given the backdrop and the changes, the regulatory changes or changing stance, what we were really considering was, do we fund this externally and carry on it on treading the path that we had to that date, that time, and that means either taking on board debt, giving away equity, or both, or whether or not we should change tack and consider starting the business and launching the brand and attracting customers, clients, and putting in place broking and liquidity lines as a white label, which prior to that is something that we hadn't had at the forefront of our minds.
Okay, so what decisions did you come to?
Well, the decision really was to move to the white label space with Aureus FX, and the reason for that was because we just felt it gave us the platform to develop the technology that we need and to really put some processes and systems together, which in turn would aid the application, our FCA application further down the line. And secondly, it gave us a business and a business environment to recruit the people with experience, the senior people that we need.
That's quite different to your experience. You're used to operating in a regulated business, regulated entity. Aureus, as you mentioned, is a white label. How does that feel, the difference between the two?
Well, on the ground floor, I'm pleased to say that it feels really similar. We're offering the same sort of FX hedging and payment services support to clients that are in the same sector, same corporate sector, by and large. And our standards in terms of how we deliver that and maintain that is very, very similar.
So you mentioned a few times that there's more than just you and your partner in the business. So leads nicely on to, let's talk about some recruitment. How are you going about recruitment? How are you trying to attract the top talent with the industry, and just summarize how that's going so far?
So well, the recruitment of people is always a challenge, particularly good people. We wanted to find people that had the same kind of aspirations as us and wanted to come on the journey that we've got laid out before us. We used used our network of connections. We've got a small team of people right now. There's around 10 people. Well, it's 10 people. Certainly by the summer that we're working for Aureus FX. So I guess you can say we've been fairly successful, and we've got our founding team in place.
If you've managed to attract some, quite in your own words, some good talent, some fairly senior members of staff, how have you attracted them to the business?
Yeah, well, that's tough. But I referred to before about people that want to come on the same journey as us and see the same opportunity that we see in Aureus FX and starting a new business in this sector. So we've actually brought two people to date in and offered them equity in the business as part of our partnership program. And those guys have got founder level equity and have also got some roles and some responsibilities that you'd expect to be tied into that. And that's been successful.
So we know you've done this before, but Aureus is a new business. What's it like building a new business? Well,
so this is like my previous experiences, big and small. This is fun and challenging in kind of equal measures, and that is what really, really appeals to me. So this is finding the right systems, adopting the right processes. This is like making things work, moving things forward, and inside all of that are some real challenges, some hard work, and some hard thinking, but we've got a really good team, and together we've made a really good start on that. So yeah, I guess I'm attracted to that sort of challenge, full stop. But if you look back in terms of how far we've come already in the first 6 months of our tenure, then yeah, really proud of what we're doing.
So talk to me about clients. Are you trading at the moment?
Yeah, we've made a good start. We've onboarded a handsome number of clients, and we're trading for those businesses now. And really broad kind of global mix of people as well. So we've got people in the UK, corporates in the UK, and then we've got people inside Europe, and then people from pretty wide-reaching places. And yeah, so far so good. So the facilities and the solution provided to us via our counterparties, yeah, is stacking up, and we are making a difference. And so far, repeat trading and client retention is really good.
So it sounds like you've made a good start. What would you say between you and the partners? What are the goals for the business?
Well, they're quite processional, and that sounds quite drab and boring, but you know, we've only been operational now for 6 months, a touch more, and so it's steady away. We've got goals, objectives, and we'll follow the paths that we think will lead us to those outcomes, you know, quite steadfastly. Having said that, there are also opportunities to kickstart, jumpstart, take a big step forward that are floating around. So it's a mixture of being wise, patient, and seeing what happens next. Really.
Well, that leads it very nicely on to the last question I've got. What is next?
Next is more of the same. We have a pretty steady fix on getting back to the regulated world. And so at some stage, we're going to pick up on the 12 months of work we put into the FCA application. And we are going to put that process back on track. As I mentioned before, we took a 12-month lease on a really smart place to work. So we need to decide on how aggressively we recruit and what space we need to work in, and whether or not we need to move location. We are now working with 3 external brokers to provide liquidity, and there's some more to do in terms of facilities and building, extending those relationships. It's a busy time, but and there's a lot that it would be too drab to talk about. But yeah, there's a lot to do. But I feel really confident and buoyed up in terms of getting it done.
Well, Mark, thanks so much for coming in and sharing your story. Best of luck with it all. Where can people go to find out a little bit more about Aureus FX?
Yeah, so please visit the website, which is aureusfx.com. If you want to drop us a mail, it's info@aureusfx.com. In fact, I'd like people to go there because myself and my partners have really chosen to push our message and push our business and push our solution out via the use of moving image and definitely using our tone of voice. So we're trying to do this sort of stuff, be on camera, represent ourselves as people and speak for ourselves. So yeah, get over there, have a look. Hopefully you like what you see.
Fabulous. Our second guest is Archie Scarborough. Archie is the CEO of Fiscal FX. Fiscal FX have recently received some good news in terms of becoming a regulated entity within the FX and payment space. Archie will go on to talk to us about the highs and lows of that experience and what it means going forward. So please welcome Archie to the show. So how did Fiscal start?
So it came about, I was working at a FX broker. I was there for 5 or 6 years, and it came around to a point in my life where I was thinking of one of two things, right? I either go and work for someone else and go and start again, because the brokerage that I was at was quite limited in their resources, and then, or I go off and do it my own, right? And there'd been a few people at my company that had gone on and done that thing, so I was aware of how to kind of set it up and go and look at that. So I made a few inquiries, as you do, and handed in my notice, and the rest is history, I think.
Yeah. And back then, it's 5 years ago, right?
Yep.
So what were your ambitions 5 years ago?
You know what? I was at a point in my life where my kids were young, and I wanted a bit of a lifestyle business. Right, you know, things have changed since then, and your mindset changes as you go along. So I think the ambition was just to have a nice life. Do you know what I mean? And foreign, it's quite stressful working in foreign exchange. I'm sure you're aware. Like it's high pressured. Like there's lots of stress, markets, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And to just have that time with kids, and it was just a bit of a transition in my life where I just thought, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But yeah, things changed quickly after that. I think we had COVID come in just after. I left in 2019 in August, and then 6 months after with my non-solicitation, COVID came in. All my clients disappeared off the side of the planet. Yeah. So I was left at home doing some decking, as you do in the middle of COVID.
So from then to now, and we'll get on to sort of more recent current affairs with Fiscal.
Yeah.
But what led you to believe in the last couple of years that becoming regulated was the right step for the business?
So during that, the early stages, there was one of our partners actually had a bit of an internal issue, and they I don't know exactly what it was. I don't want to throw shade at it, but the book of clients we had to be transitioned to somewhere else quite quickly. Right, and it left us with a pinch point of not being able to do deals with clients. And I realised at that point that being able to control your own process with what's going on and being your own authorised and regulated entity was super important, because ultimately, like, the products everyone else has got in the market are great, but in terms of what you can actually control, you're limited, right? With the foreign exchange, everything else is, as you've worked in a regulated business, it's all done by people in the office. And if you're not working with those people, it becomes a pinch point for your business. And, if you want longevity, I think, in this industry, that you need to be able to have that stamp of approval, right?
Yeah.
So.
Did everyone agree? Was everyone else on board from executive level?
Well, when I can come around to this, but when I first did it, it was just like a decision I came up with. Like, there was no one else on my board apart from my wife at the time.
Okay.
She just didn't have a clue. Do you know what I mean? It was like, what? I don't understand what you're talking about. But I think, like, coming round to the second time that we did it, it was but the board was slightly different then, right? So we brought people in, and there was discussions around, especially with senior members of staff, like, there's a high cost to it. Is it worth it? We're doing well. This is going to eat into all your profits. And as shareholders, you look at that, and it was whether I say yes or no. I think that ultimately the decision, like I said before, is having that control of process and having that stamp was just almost like a must, really.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that, because that's where I was going next. So when you say application, you're talking about API application to the FCA.
Yeah.
So first time round, talk me through that. What happened first time?
First time round, I was slightly naive, to say the least. So we took on a consultant that we spent a little bit of money with, right? And I was kind of like, okay, this is maybe what it costs, right? And we went through the process. We hired a MLRO, basically submitted the application at that point. I realised quite quickly that you need a lot more work than that, right? And it came to the point where I think the FCA was almost like, you've written this on the back of a fag packet, like, please take a step back.
Okay.
So they asked us, so what happens is, as part of the process, they ask you to withdraw the application, rather than, I think it's like they put it on their notice page, you've been rejected. So obviously we took the application away, and then we looked at ourselves in the mirror very, very long and hard, and decided, like, do we go for this again, like I was saying. So I think when did the second one, I think the plan was to kind of like all in, basically, like
do it properly,
spend the money, get the staff in, really go and get some expensive people on your books, basically.
Yeah. I mean, what was the feeling when you'd been unsuccessful? Like, were you naive enough to think that what you'd put in was gonna get through, or were you expecting potentially kickback? Like, where were you at with that?
There was a few things that I'd probably say were a bit jovial, like of what I'd done. Not done, like there was nothing underhanded, but
Yeah.
there were certain things on that, as I look back at it now, it would have been a bit of my head of compliance would laughed at a few things, just to say the least. So I think there was a lot that we learned quickly. Do you know what I mean? So yeah.
So you mentioned there about, I guess, starting again and getting some expensive people, a new group of people together. Who were they? How tough was it to find them?
So one thing that we tried to trying to find a head of compliance for an unregulated business is quite and you haven't got full-time work for them, right? Because they're
not really needed.
Yeah,
are they?
not really needed.
Yeah.
Right? They're not onboarding clients, not doing transaction monitoring, whatever it might be. They're coming in to write some documents, and then at that point they're kind of like, what are you doing? And it's a really tough one to have that conversation with people. So we spoke to recruiters. Obviously they want big fees, as recruiters do, for big salaries. And we hired Andrew Harrison, who was the group M&RO from Money Corp. He was there for 25 years, so he was a massive hire for us.
Yeah,
right? And I
yeah.
remember sitting down with Billy, being who's one of our other executives, sitting down with him and being like, look at this guy on LinkedIn. I'd reached out to him myself, and he actually came back to us, and I was like, what the hell's this guy talking to us for? And we went through the process with him, and he was actually on his he was on gardening leave. And he was like having a conversation with us, and it was really bizarre. And he was the most expensive person on our list. So we managed to have a bit of a deal with him, as I like to do, and managed to get him in. We then had to hire a few other people, so IT. Again, we got that through connections. I think a lot of the time we found that speaking to people in the industries are quite a good place to start for finding people.
Yeah.
But I find like recruitment is very difficult in what we do anyway. But I think if you speak to people in the industry, that there's lots of people out there, or even just on the outskirts of it, that have good experience. So and then head of operations, and then we've hired other people in between since. Really, they were the main people, and non-executives as you have to bring in. And
So let's get into sort of the application itself around the regulator in particular. I've heard that can be quite difficult. You're following their processes. You've got to get an understanding of what they require. That can't be easy. I mean, how did you and the team find all of that?
So one of the things I found was, like I say, having that good experience around you for someone who dealt with a regulator for a long time. So Andrew, like I say, he dealt with regulators. He's had that experience the whole way through. He was like worth his weight in gold. Hopefully he doesn't see too much into this when he looks back at it. But he was great, and he knew how to deal with that situation. So the application itself, we submitted on the first part of it, like 1,500 pages or 1,400 pages of documents that we put together, like policies, procedures. It took us about 5 months to piece it all together. And then this real simple website the FCA's got that you go on there and you fill in all your details and sign PDFs and upload it, and and then you have to pay a fee and sign declarations, and then you basically sit on your hands until you get signed a case officer.
Okay.
And then you sit on your hands a bit longer while they review your application, and then then it starts to start rolling. But it's that period in between where you're just like, what's going on? Do you know what I mean? There's always like, why have I not heard back from anyone?
Yeah.
What's happening on their side of it? And I think I found the whole way through it that they were very open. We was very very privileged with the case officer we had. She was very experienced in our area. She knew our industry very well. So I think there's a few speed bumps on the way, but we managed to kind of navigate, and
So in those like 1,500 pages, I imagine that's quite different to the first time to the second.
Yeah, I mean the first one could have been 100 pages. It was like literally you couldn't. They're not even comparable.
So what are the specifics involved in the second piece of thorough, proper work? Like what are the specifics?
It's actually like things like forming your board, right? Having board meetings. We never had a board meeting before, apart from when you do your dividends and all that kind of stuff. Like having that governance and actually starting to sit down and have those conversations, and pulling out management information for OpsCo and different committees that start forming whilst you're doing the application. And I think that all of that stuff, you're learning as you go along, right? Because both you and I worked in sales. Yeah, we're salespeople, right? And that's where we come from. Going to be like a CEO of a regulated business is different from being a sales guy, right? They're different things, and you go as you go. Well, I did anyways. I went through the application process. That you find I learned a lot on that journey, and it's a very long journey.
Yeah. So let's just dig in slightly to the learnings for anyone else considering going down the same path. What would you say is the areas that need the most attention?
Staff, definitely having the right people on your team, like support around you. Revenue is a big one. You need to be able to support paying big salaries and also be able to support your own business, because they are two separate businesses. One's an unregulated, one's a regulated. They have different interests. One's just guys on the phone trying to get deals done. The other one is, like a corporate entity, and you having that, being aware of that is and I think time as well, being patient. You have to be patient with it. Like, if you try and rush it, all you're going to do is end up with tears, basically, as I found out in the first one, right? And I've tried to rush it through and tried to think, and it just cost me money, cost me time. So I'd probably say that, you need to be, patience is probably the biggest one.
Let's talk about interviews. I know part of the process is being interviewed by the FCA or FCA representatives. How did you find that? And if anyone else had to be interviewed, how did they find that?
Yeah, so it was a pretty daunting experience. I must say it was a bit like the unknown, but there was kind of two things to it, right? So the fear of actually doing it, but also the preparation, the learning part of it, the knowing your application, knowing your requirements, knowing your reg data, know when you have to do those things and being able to understand it. And I think like my advice to anyone else doing this would be like, get proper consultants in that they know what they're doing and what to expect, because that was helpful as part of the interview process. They interviewed myself and our MLRO, and they made a point at that stage where they said they normally do all their interviews at that point. So we've heard before that they would do other interviews after, but she was like, no, these are all your interviews done for the business. We don't want to speak to anyone else, because we was unsure if they'd want to. It was an interesting process, very daunting. It was to like an hour's worth of like a Zoom call. Right. I think I had my tracksuit bottoms on one of the interviews, but we had the second call. We had a call with them as the second call, and I was in my shirt like this, and my daughter came in at the end of the day. I was at home, and I came in. I had my tracksuit bottoms on. It was, but they were all look. They're decent. They're humans. You know what I mean? They're just doing their job and they're doing their due diligence on you, right?
Good.
It was good.
Well, follow on for that. I'm sure at the time when this goes out, the news will be everywhere, but you've recently been approved.
Yes.
You are regulated. So massive congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Talk me through how that felt when that finally came through, that good news.
It was like probably the most stressful 9 months of my life. And it came to so Billy, who's a very good friend of mine, executive in the business, like we were just like over the moon. Like it was, we were over the moon by it, and all the team were, everyone had done so much work on it. It was like such a relief. You get like what happens is you get like a minded grant essentially, and that gives you show us this and this, and we'll give you the approval essentially. And we had those bits. We just had to get our ducks in a row with it, and it was really exciting. We took everyone down the pub. I still haven't taken the people who actually did the application down the pub, but we will do. And it was just a great team moment. We're going to do a bit of a launch party and that kind of stuff. And it was amazing.
Yeah. So like as one journey ends, another one, you really now will probably feel like you're just getting started in a way.
Yeah.
What do you think Fiscal needs in order to keep on the trajectory of progression that's already on?
I think what we need is probably to keep focus, right? There's a pinch point at the moment of moving clients from unregulated to a regulated model. And I think that if we can keep focused and keep the progression going in the business, we've come a long way. Some of the team we've had involved and the people are, a massive part of that, right? It's not me sitting here being like, it's all done by me, because it hasn't been, right? I think having a good team around you And I think, you know, having the authorization from the regulator gives you a bit of a stamp for, you know, people that work in the industry that, you know, might want to come and be part of your business that didn't want to be part of it before, because you now have gone through that journey.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think we need to get back at it really, and you know, push on.
So what? I mean, final question: what are the next steps post regulation?
So I think the next, up until the end of the year, where our financial year is, we're going to be just focusing on building revenue, and then we are going to put a plan together for MiFID. To look at options. Go again. Yeah. So we're already thinking about that. There is like maybe an EMI, but I don't know if the product is there that we want to kind of necessary for our clients. So I think the options route might be our next step. But I think the next like kind of 6 to 12 months is just building back revenue and getting back in line, really.
All right, brilliant. Well, thanks very much for coming to see us.
For having us.
Congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
Your regulation. That's been awesome to hear about the journey and what it's taken to get there. Tell us a little bit more about where we can find Fiscal.
On our website, fiscalfx.co.uk, and then our social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter. I think there's a Facebook of some kind. I'm not too sure. But there's some stuff going out. And I think there might be some blogs and stuff like that.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
All right.
Great stuff.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Ross.
Our third guest on the show today is Daniel Biggs. Dan is the CEO of Privalgo. Today, Dan talks to us about the reasons why he started Privalgo and brings us all up to the current day, where they're currently processing north of 100,000 payments per month. So please welcome Dan to the show. When and how did Privalgo start?
Privalgo started in 2018. The reason it existed is on the back of a set of undesirable circumstances. I'd worked for one of the biggest providers in the space for over a decade. And we carried out a management buyout through private equity, and that journey wasn't for me. So I left that organisation at the end of 2017. I knew that I wasn't finished in the space, and out of necessity couldn't be finished in the space. So set about building the vision for Privalgo, the business plan for Privalgo, and identifying the core team of Privalgo.
Okay. And who was part of the core team?
So we've got a gentleman who was our initial investor, a guy called Stuart Blake, who's a very close friend of mine and also was a part of the previous firm I was involved in. And a core team from our last organisation, a gentleman called Zeb Balm, Richard Chun, who's our IT wizard, and a gentleman called Matthew Clark, who was our commercial director.
Yeah. So what were the early goals and objectives for the business?
Quite honestly, it had to be sustainable. So it's very common for new businesses to fail. There were a number of people's livelihoods at stake when we started the company. So we wanted to establish ourselves quickly to become profitable and also a sustainable business on its own right. And once we saw that we could achieve that, we started to design what we thought would be a scalable business for the future.
Okay, and so what gave you the confidence that what you wanted to create and your vision for Privalgo, what gave you the confidence that was achievable?
First of all, we had a vision, and we have a vision. So we through our own collective experiences, and I've got a team around me, so I think that's a very important factor. But through our collective experiences, we felt that we understood what could be better in the industry, and that was our North Star. Mm-hmm. Then I had the benefit of having a really strong team. So I had some supporters from the beginning, some people that joined Privalgo from the very early stages, and I had a fantastic investor behind me. So money and people really help.
Yeah. Makes things a bit easier.
Yeah.
A lot of, from what I know of Privalgo, a lot of your work has been focused on building a broad and deep pool of banks, brokers, etc. What does that all look like?
So we have a really broad range of counterparties, and we decided strategically that we felt that was really important. A number of businesses in the segment tend to focus on their sales approach, their sales proposition, their ability to acquire customers. We took a slightly tougher road, and we wanted to look at how do we best service the customer. The institutions that exist and the most established institutions have probably got the best products and services out there. What they want is a catalyst to be able to bring transactional flow, payment flow to them. So we set out to build a counterparty network that was complete and could solve a number of our clients' problems. So to date, we probably have around 12 counterparties that we work from a payment services point of view, and we have another further 4 or 5 liquidity partners. So we're strong in both our domestic and international payment services, but we also have deep access to strong liquidity as well.
Am I right in saying that technology would be quite a big part of Privalgo's proposition?
Yeah, it's a significant part of our investment strategy.
Okay.
It's also the backbone of how we serve, and I think the use of technology through automation and client proposition has been one of our real key benefactors.
Okay. And Privalgo's now in its, correct me if I'm wrong, it's its 6th year of trading. How would you describe the culture in the business, and what would you say about the people you work with?
And look, so I think culture is really interesting because sometimes cultures are designed, but they shouldn't be, because cultures are a reflection of how people act as a group. And we set out to let the culture form. We have got values that we stick to and we measure ourselves by. But the culture is one of constant improvement. We want to service our client well, want to be professional, but we want to have fun while we do it as well.
Okay.
But the important part of identifying what your culture is and developing a culture is letting it foster naturally.
You mentioned servicing the client well. How would you best describe the proposition?
We are a solution-based provider. We are setting out to identify the problem, identify the weakness for the client, and provide an alternative solution and outcome to that problem.
Okay.
And if you can do that comprehensively for your client, they value you and they stay with you. And then your job, our job, is to prove that we deliver that time and time again.
Okay. And bearing those factors in mind, I'm sure you have managed to achieve that with it being your 6th year. Are there any numbers or headline figures that outline the growth or the size that Privalgo is at this moment?
We process monthly around 100,000 payments on behalf of our clients. And the reason that's important is because it demonstrates the breadth of not only a counterparty network, but also the technology that we can provide to our customers that support that type of volume. So we've quickly become the go-to organisation for payment processing. And the way that we've built the systems is that we can significantly scale on that number without significant amounts of further investment. On top of that, we have, by virtue of the fact that we've built such a strong group of supporting counterparties, have access to around 140 currencies, and we pay funds all over the world globally. I tend not to focus on like the core numbers, but actually what really is important to the business and to the clients is that we evidence that we continue to evolve our proposition to help them find solutions to their headaches.
Okay. And you've been doing this, as you mentioned at the start, 20 years in the deliverable FX space.
Yeah.
Why, in your opinion, do you think that businesses like Privalgo are quite consistent at winning business or taking business away, shall we say, from banks and institutions, like traditional methods of buying and selling or moving money around the world?
I'll go back to it. We want to try and have a deep understanding of the problem that you require to be solved, and we want to solve it for you. And then we want to build around that problem, and we want to try and turn it into an advantage for us and a solution for you.
Okay. What are the next steps then for Privalgo?
So the market's actually is developing quite quickly. So both from a regulatory standpoint and from a licensing standpoint, and also a domestic scheme standpoint. So we see the future of Privalgo as being a internationally present organisation that utilises domestic regulation and domestic banking and schemes to be able to support our clients. So the future is about international growth.
Okay. And where did the challenges lie within that?
Vast. The regulatory hurdles and the complexity of electronic money institutions, derivatives business, MiFID services businesses, and payment schemes are complex to navigate. The barrier to entry is really high, and you have to invest both financially and from a time point of view around substance. And a lot of businesses who are chasing just top-line growth probably find it hard to focus on areas like regulatory framework and banking framework. We actually think that that's a good challenge for us to face.
So I noticed earlier you've just moved into your new office. Looks marvellous.
Thank you very much.
So what are the goals and objectives for Privalgo right now?
So obviously growth's the key objective, but there's 6 pillars that really we're focusing on. And that is that we want to build the industry-leading client experience. We want to build a dynamic sales machine that can conquer all of the markets that we choose to enter in. We want to continue to develop and focus on a market-defining technology platform and proposition. So being the best in class in terms of the speed of access, the experience for our clients. We want to attract, retain, and champion just the best talent in the whole of the industry. Evolve our diverse counterparties, continue to build on what they can support us to achieve. And we want fast, smart, and informed decision making. So if we can achieve all of those things, we think we can bring best in class to the sector.
You don't want much then?
I want the world on a stick.
And last question I've got for you is a bit more of a selfish question, but in terms of leadership, you're clearly a leader within Privalgo, and at the previous business, I know you were a leader within that. What would your advice be for someone sort of new into that role in our sector?
First of all, I think you should understand what type of leader you are. So how am I going to lead my organisation, and what do I want to represent? I think it's important that you look to identify how you build a team, and then what's the common thread that you're going to get asked for these people to buy into. And having that short and long-term vision and getting people to invest in it emotionally is the thing that will be available for you to build your leadership skills.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
But no, thank you very much for coming in, Dan. Really appreciate it, sharing your story with us. Where can people go to find out a little bit more about you and subsequently your business?
You'll find us at privalgo.co.uk. Our door is always open. We love people to come see the business, visit the business, spend time with the business. We're all over LinkedIn as well. And you can always pick the phone up just like the good old days as well.
Cool. All right, thank you.